Man, yo, what's going on? It's your boy Brandon Berg, man. Sorry, man, I had to get up in here real quick, man. Really, man, I really want to drop a really important video, man. I really want to talk about a little bit. It's not gonna be super long, but will not be super short either. Definitely want to really talk about the Chinese involvement of the Arabic slave trade. It was actually a huge connection uh, of a lot of Eastern Africans uh, trade with basically with China. A lot of various African states on the eastern part of the continent deal with a lot of trades from gold to certain type of marble, porcelain, to even liquor. Silver, precious metal, and even slaves as a huge commodity. And this also was um, a 600-year um, dealing with of the slave trade of China, involving Chinese, with a lot of African states as well, with Arabic states as well. Um, like I said, slavery in China is a very ancient thing. I think it was like the second millennium of BC, so around 2000 BC, or if I'm mistaken, um, 2000 BC, somewhere around that timeline, the Shang Dynasty started enslaving his own people. I think they enslaved as much as like 5% of the population, and they were referenced as the second slave dynasty, because that's how much slavery and feudalism was practiced in that ancient Chinese culture. But it's also during the Arabic slave trade that started in the 7th century AD. Chinese was actually involved in the thick of things, um, going back from the two dynasties of the Tang and the Song dynasty, and it started from 1618 AD, and I think it ended like somewhere like 1279 AD. So it basically lasts for almost over 600 years, way longer than the European slave trade and slavery of Africa on the western side of the continent. But yeah, Eastern African states, um, from Ethiopia all the way down to certain parts of Tunisia, Zanzibar. That's actually part of, I think, Tasmania, was actually involved with this slave trade as well as the Arab. And over the 600 years, the numbers really wasn't it wasn't really put out. Um, it wasn't really put out, but it was but I did some calculations because I remember one of the researchers I actually looked up some of the numbers that they were the numbers of slaves they were bringing was around 500 slaves or something like that. They wasn't really didn't really drop it per month or per week. I think they said like an annually 500 to 600 slaves. So I did calculation about 600 slaves getting transported, um, and calculated like about 600 years spent, 600 years time span, and it came to almost over 360,000. But if you add a couple hundreds, or maybe even another, or double the population, or double the number, it almost came to a million. So it was between a million and over 360,000 slaves that were transported to China during that time period. And a lot of Chinese, when they acquired these African slaves, they called them Zulon. And sorry, man. Then they call them Zulon. So Zulon in China would basically mean um, a low class servant of that was um, that was dangerous, scary, very inferior, and almost like an animal, a wild animal. And they basically, that was the name they were given um, by the Chinese at that time during their culture. And they used the slaves for basically two or three things. They used them for like servitude, and they also used quite a bit of them for basically as a uh, sex acts or concubine. Many of the female slaves were basically used as concubines or basically servants, like home servants or something like that, where the males were used to basically be servants and also be put in their military um, to serve in the military and stuff like that at that time, because they were also warring um, with other nations at the time and other feudal states at the time as well. It was very surprising, because you think about with the recent involvement of China now in the African continent, and you really this is not really talked about. And at first, I was curious to really learn more about China, because I need to learn more about China, because there's a lot of racism that's coming out of China, and I kind of wonder why this mentality is the way it is. And I did some research while I was researching the Arabic slave trade. That their name came up. Their name actually came up, and they were referenced in buying them in the Arabic was basically trading slave. Basically involving trades and then dealt with slaves. Um, so, the Arabic slave trade was a huge, huge beast. It's almost an understatement, and almost like an unspoke thing going on that Black society we need to also talk about. I know we talk about European and everything and their involvement, and being a Black American, that's definitely a very important detail. But we need to talk about the Arabic slave trade, because the Arabic slave trade is almost like a catalyst of how the European got involved, and how a lot of different race mixing was also going involved. Because if you look at like Hong Kong is Canton, Cantonese, sorry man. If you look at Canton, where Hong Kong's on, a lot of those people was kind of dark skinned, and what I found out in researching about the African enslavement in China, that a lot of those slaves went to Canton. You know what I'm saying? Canton, so region. So you have a lot of dark skinned Chinese that's basically is located there, because you go to China, there's different shades of Chinese. You have real dark skin, almost of a Negro um, type of phenotype. But then you have the pale skin, really of a Caucasian Mongoloid type of traditional type of a Chinese. But if you go to Southern Chinese or South China or the southern part of West China, a lot of people was a little bit darker skinned. So the slave trade in China was basically pertaining to going towards Cantonese and going to southern and western China. And that's where you get your a lot of darker Chinese, because actually a lot of them were probably descendants of a lot of African slaves um, that basically was brought, and a lot of those the slaves that was brought over there basically came from like Madagascar and the Comos Island, or that, if I'm mistaken, the Como Islands is off of Zanzibar or off of Tanzania. So it's a lot of things that need to be spoken for with the China involvement in the Arabic slave trade. And people need to understand the Arabic slave trade was very huge. I mean, it wasn't. They dealt with over 17 million slaves. Um, trading in the three continents. You know what I'm saying? Also enslaving a lot of people from both continents of Europe and Africa. I think white America. I mean, white. Like for European, there was white slaves involved in the Arabic slave trade. Close to 1 million Arabic white European slaves from the Mediterranean region that were enslaved by the Barbarian powers, but they also said the Barbarian powers also did a lot of slave raids and was very, very devastating in their coastline. Um, and like I said, this is like a three continent. You had slave trading going on in Europe, Africa, and Asia at the time. So this is a very big monster in the room, and a bigger shocker that China had also was buying African slaves and also involved in the Arabic slave trade. So this definitely was something that needed to be spoken about, because this kind of like almost explained the reason, the undertone of racism from Chinese to a lot of black or African origins or genetic people globally, on the global front. So this definitely will shine the light, and I'll talk a little bit more about this Chinese involvement, because I know in the Java, I think the Java Islands and somewhere in there, South Pacific, they also dealt with the slave trade as well of African going up there to China, but they also were dealing with a lot of slaves going to India as well. As you got part of the Saudis, a lot of that were Bantu people, and in the Zing, that was also Arabic for black. That's also coexist of Zanzibar. That was actually Bantu as well. So it's a lot of things that need to come out to the light, and I'll definitely get with you guys later on about that. Alright, and like I said, you guys like to comment, hit the likes. If you want to put a comment below, definitely do too, and I'll get with you guys shortly. Alright, bye.